And my name is Ashlea Lantz. I'm from Iowa, which is below Minnesota and above Missouri, for any of you who don't know where Iowa is. So I did wake up really early. Quick few minutes about me. I am a family member. I'm a past provider of employment services where I oversaw a program in Iowa. And then I'm also a certified benefits community partner, and also got my CRC a couple of years ago from Drake University in Iowa. So that's a bit about me, but we do have a lot of content, so I'm just going to keep us moving. What are we going to talk about today? So we'll briefly, just on touch of the iceberg, what is discovery and customized employment? More specifically, how does that apply to your role? Then we'll look at how do we identify people's skills, interests, abilities, conditions for employment, and then how do we take that information and identify vocational themes as opposed to identifying what job descriptions people might fit into. And then we'll get to interest-based negotiation. And I think the word negotiation scares a lot of people off, but hopefully by the end of our short 2 hours together, you'll feel maybe a bit more comfortable with the idea of the negotiation component. So my hopes for you at the end of our time together is that you'll have some information about applying concepts of discovery to increase your ability to help folks obtain meaningful long-term careers. So how we do that, a lot of times we fill out applications, right? So we'll look at various ways of supporting folks to obtain employment. How do we learn about a job seeker using various modalities, and as opposed to maybe just standardized assessments? And then how do we use themes as opposed to job descriptions, and eventually negotiating the win-win? So how do we currently support people in finding a career? There are various ways. There are, I've just put up a few of the various ways or structures, theories as far as supporting people with disabilities to obtain employment. One is the Individualized Placement and Support Model, or IPS, which is an evidence-based model in supporting folks who experience chronic mental illness in obtaining employment. The traditional supported employment, so folks that maybe need a little bit of extra support, working with a job developer or a job coach. A lot of times we use the labor market approach of job development. So we look at what our business is doing, where are they hiring the most, and then how do we train the population to fit into those needs. And then we also have customized employment, which is the opposite of labor market. So we look at the person first and say, tell me a bit about you, your interests, your abilities, and then we look at where the match is. And then the question mark is, there are various other ways that, all of you are using, and maybe it's a bit of each of various models, but for our time together today, we'll really be focusing on using concepts of customized employment and applying that to your role. So how do we currently get to know job seekers? So take a minute and think about, as you start working with someone who's come to you to help with employment, how do you get to know them? Is it through a standardized assessment? Is it through going through a series of preset questions and asking, for answers to each of those 50 questions? Is it meeting at your office? Is it meeting at a coffee shop? Where are you meeting with the job seeker? Is it over the phone? And then also, how are we supporting that information to help them compete with a job? Sorry, there was a little blip that came up, but you guys don't see that. Great. So applications, resumes, all of that's just information on paper, and then we hope that it gets us to the job, right? So 90% of people think the easiest way to get a job is filling out an application. However, the majority of the population doesn't get a job by filling out an application. My current job, I didn't fill out an application. There wasn't a posting for an opening. It was a conversation. And for many of us, think about how you got into your roles. It's oftentimes through networking, conversations we've had, people we know, as opposed to filling out an application and competing. So for individuals who may struggle with competing with a job description, why is it that we go about using the standardized method of filling out an application, crossing our fingers, and hoping somebody gets the job? So now I want you to take a few minutes and think about, how do we get to know people in general? Think about your spouse, your best friend, people that you work with. How do you generally get to know them? It's typically through conversations, spending time together. It's not usually through an assessment or a 50-page questionnaire of, please fill this out and then we'll decide whether or not we can be friends. So I think a lot of times, why do we think that we have to put all these standardized procedures in getting to know somebody and their career path when naturally that's not how we get to know people? So just something for you to think about. When we use concepts of discovery, we're really asking people to get to know someone in a more organic way. So what is customized employment? The Office of Disability Employment Policy defines the term as customized employment means individualizing the employment relationship between employees and employers in ways that meet the needs of both. So you're getting to know the job seeker, you're getting to know the business, and you're negotiating so that it meets the needs of both. So the business gets a great employee that's going to help increase their bottom line. The employee is helping the business in doing so, but meeting a need that the business has. So it's not a pity hire or, please hire this person. It makes good business sense. So when we look at the customized employment process, there are kind of 4 different divisions. So discovering personal genius, or discovery, at Griffin Hammis we call it DPG, which is really taking the time to get to know someone using the discovery process. Step 2 is cultivating employment opportunities or job development. 3 is when we look at engaging employment supports. And 4, we're planning for ongoing supports and career development. All of us get into careers and hope that there's a trajectory, right? We don't hope that we're in the same position for the rest of our lives for the next 30 years. We want to see that career progression. So when we look at the idea of customized employment and using discovery to get to the customized employment outcome, discovery really tells us to stop and get to know who this person is first through a variety of techniques of a home visit, so visiting someone at their home, utilizing informational interviews. Also, if someone receives public benefits such as SSI or SSDI, we want to make sure that those things are taken into consideration, and really talking to people who know this person well, besides the paid professionals in their lives. Who do they spend time with? Oftentimes, if you even ask someone, anybody, if you say, Ashley, tell me a little bit about yourself, I'll tell you so much. However, if you talk to my husband, my mom, my best friend, and my colleagues, you get a much bigger picture of who I am. And then we look at, that information then drives where we go, not the business opening. It's the person and their contribution that really directs the job development process. So discovery will answer a couple of different questions. The big one is, who is this person? So the intent is I get a picture of who this person is, not only from them, but from various perspectives of people in their life who are supportive. And then what are my ideal conditions for employment? We all have ideal conditions. So what are the things you have to be successful on the job? It might be flexibility. It might be working in the morning. It might be having a lot of structure. It's different for all of us. But when one of those conditions aren't met, we're not oftentimes successful, or we don't stay in the job very long because that condition isn't being met. So for example, one of my conditions is I like flexibility. I have to have flexibility in my role. If I was regimented and I clocked in at 8:30 and out at 4:30 and only had an hour break, I don't think I would stay very long because it's not meeting my condition of employment. And then what themes drive job development? Again, we all have themes. Think about most of you who are participating in the training probably have a theme of helping people or working with people, right? All of us are in the industry of supporting folks. And then we look at that information, and then again, that drives the process. So that's a key component of customized employment. So discovery drives the job development process. It also begins with the premise that all people can work. So we're not meeting with someone and identifying, oh, I'm sorry, you can't work, or you're unemployable. The premise is that all people have contribution. Discovery is also the bedrock of employment planning. So we get to know someone through the process of discovery, and that drives the process. And then discovery is always driven by the job seeker's strengths, needs, interests, and conditions for employment. So what we know and learn about the person, again, drives where we go. Individualization is a key component of the discovery process. It's one person at a time. Now, I don't mean that that's one person on your caseload at a time, but it means that you're solely focusing on that person as opposed to a group process. So, for example, if I'm meeting with Joe, I'm only reaching out to businesses that make sense for Joe, as opposed to Joe, Pete, Sally, and Ann. So I take Joe's information and that directs where I go. It also requires negotiation. So in order to identify something as customized, something has to be negotiated, right? So sometimes we use the process of discovery, but it might lead to a wage job. It doesn't necessarily lead to a customized job, and that's okay. But 9 times out of 10, the match is much greater because we've really identified what are those conditions for employment. And then employment development is determined by the individual, not job openings or what the labor market is doing, okay? So again, there's nothing wrong with that approach. It just doesn't work for everybody. So what is discovery? Discovery replaces the idea of a traditional assessment. So again, not to say that traditional assessments don't work, they just don't work for everybody, particularly folks that would have difficulty in competing with a job description. So discovery replaces that traditional assessment that you might use. So you wouldn't want to use discovery and various assessments. Discovery takes the place of. It's also competency based. So we're looking at people's contributions, not their deficits. And then employment is always the outcome. There's a big piece which is translation of observation into contribution. And so we'll get a little bit about how does that apply to your role and how do you get that information. But how am I spending my time, and then how does that direct where I might be able to contribute? And then is also discovery is the very foundation of customized employment. So if you think about it, if you don't really know somebody very well, it's pretty difficult to customize something on their behalf to their benefit. So if I know the person through the process of discovery, it gives me the tools as the developer or the employment specialist to customize that role. So how in the world does this apply to your work? You might be sitting there thinking, well, gee, Ashley, this is great, but I don't work for a service provider, and I'm not providing long-term job coaching, and I don't have time for home visits. So we'll dive into how can you use these components as part of your role to get to know job seekers in a more meaningful way. So first of all, I think it starts with having a conversation as opposed to a question and answer session. So none of us like to be interrogated. It's not the best way to get information out of folks. Even the minute you open your laptop and pull out notes, that sets the precedence that you're in power. So think about how you even present yourself. What are you wearing? Where are you meeting? Even meeting across someone from the desk sets the idea that you're the person in power. So the idea is let's just have a conversation with the job seeker as opposed to interrogating them. So questions such as, tell me about yourself, tell me about your family. Think about your general conversation skills and how you get to know anybody. Where do you go? Where do you spend your time? Where do people know you by name? What do you enjoy as far as family vacations? Do you go someplace every single year? Are you a sports enthusiast? Do you go on a ski trip every year? The idea is that we're keeping the questions open-ended and that the conversation will give us the information that we need, as opposed to answer these series of questions and then you feeling a little stumped of, well, this person only likes working with animals, so we just have to go look for businesses that are working with animals, but they only want to work with dogs. Where does that exist? So the idea is that you're keeping the conversation open-ended, you're getting to know people in a more genuine way, and in turn you get more information from the job seeker that way. We're all a bit more conversational when we're at ease, as opposed to when we feel like we might be being judged or assessed. So ways that you can use discovery in your work. Ask the person to take the lead on some of their own discovery, right? It doesn't mean, I understand that you probably going to somebody's home to meet with them may not be realistic. However, could they bring pictures of their home? Could they bring pieces or pictures of things that are of importance to them? And why do we pay attention to somebody's home? Because that's where 95% of us are most comfortable. It's where we've designed our own space. The books on the shelves oftentimes describe things that we're interested in. The pictures on the wall describe what we're interested in. And sometimes we just don't think to talk about those things. However, if you spend time in my space, you get to know me at a deeper level. So the idea is, could you ask the person, hey, would you mind, and you could preface it, this might sound a little creepy, I assure you it's not. Would you bring a couple of pictures of your home, the inside of your home? What does your home mean to you? What are things of importance at your house? And it also provides a conversation topic for you of tell me more about that. Tell me about how you designed your home. And then talk to others who know them well. So again, I understand that in your role, it may not be realistic for you to reach out and call the job seekers' families, friends, close relatives, or people who know them well. However, it's also a benefit for them to reach out to the people whom they know and talk to and say, hey, I'm looking for a job. I'm working with an employment professional to help me with this process, and they asked me to reach out to people I know. And so could you just tell me a little bit about where you think I would be successful? What are my contributions? What are things I'm really good at or excel at? And oftentimes, even in training, I've asked people to go and do exactly that. Identify 2 or 3 people who know you really well and ask them about their opinion of you. And oftentimes I hear people come back and say, oh, well, so-and-so told me I was a really good listener. I didn't consider that as a skill of mine. So oftentimes we're also not self-aware of our own contribution. So talking to others and then having them bring that information back to you can help you get to know them in a different way. Also, list out or have them list out businesses that are in a 5 to 10 mile radius. It could even be 15-mile radius, whatever is realistic for them from a travel component in their job search, but have them list out what businesses are even around my neighborhood. It doesn't mean that they're going to work there. It just gives you an idea of what makes up the community. So depending upon how big your radius is as well, and ask them to really, not just the big box retailers, who are the mom and pop shops, the places that have been there for years. And then talk to your neighbors. Tell your neighbors that you're looking for employment. Do they know of anybody you could connect with who has certain interests that they have? So using their own social capital, and in the same way, if you're having a conversation about where do you frequent, we're looking for their social capital, right? So if for folks in Price, I know that Marcia's Sandwich Shop is like the #1 place to go and help her. Been there, love it. Marcia knows a lot of people in town, right? So if Marcia knows me, I've got some pretty good social capital in having a conversation with Marcia. So how do people spend their time? Ask the individual, what are things that you do around the house? Are you constantly tinkering things with it around the house? Are you, I'm fixing my friend's cell phones. I met a guy last week where he's like, everybody comes to me with their cell phone problems. And I have a whole box of just cell phone tools and parts and pieces, and I just can figure it out. I'm just good at it, right? So that's valuable information. We don't necessarily know where that's going to take us yet, but that guy has skill and he's got contribution and he has a lot of know-how in figuring out how in the world to fix a cell phone. It could be sewing and not using a pattern. Again, a few weeks ago, I met with a woman who her husband uses a wheelchair, and she's like, I really enjoyed sewing. I don't use a pattern, but I just created this little pillow for his neck. And he comes home and says, this is the greatest pillow because it helps provide the exact support I need. It's not too big, it's not too bulky. But she put that together with no pattern. So there's skill there, right? It could be developing art pieces, cooking or baking, I've met with people who talk about how everybody just comes to their house because they cook every Sunday. And, that people don't just show up for bad food, right? So they're obviously doing something well. It could be making videos, fixing broken furniture, fixing cars. All of those things are tied around skill. And you can also ask folks, how did you learn about that? Who taught you how to do those things? So at the same time, you're digging to identify what are their skills contributions, but in a much different way as opposed to tell me what you're good at, because that question is harder to answer than saying, what do you do in your free time? What are you doing at home? What are you spending time working on? So how might you identify individual skills? So bottom line, everybody has skill. Everybody has contribution. Now, identifying that can be more difficult for some, right? But the idea is that through the process of discovery, through our conversations, we can identify what individual skills are. Also, again, how do you spend your time? You're searching for what skills individuals have. And then we often develop skills from others who have taught us, mentored us, and those people are oftentimes not paid to be in our lives. So who are those natural mentors in their life? Who are people that they just spend time with? Maybe they go to their uncle's house and they tinker on cars on the weekend. So they may not identify that person as a mentor, but they really are, right? They're teaching that person skills and contribution. So really pay attention to how people are spending their time, who they're spending time with, and what they're doing. Ultimately, we also want to identify those conditions for employment. So what do you need to be the best version of you? So think about that in your own life. What are the things that you really need present in your job to be successful? Is it flexibility? Is it a certain schedule? Is it doing something different every day? It looks different for all of us. But then discovery really helps us identify what those ideal conditions are. And again, when those ideal conditions aren't met, we end up leaving a job. So if you think about what's the shortest job you've ever had, mine was 2 days. I thought I was going to be a phlebotomist, and lo and behold, I didn't really enjoy poking people with a needle. I didn't even have the guts to get there, or even like on the practice arm, stick the needle in the arm. So it wasn't a good match. It was also a shift that started at 4 a.m. At that point in my life, I was not a morning person. Now today, work did start at 4 a.m. By getting on a plane. But the difference was my ideal conditions weren't met. I was working with people, however, I didn't really like the actual work. I didn't like the shift. It wasn't a good fit for me, right? So you've also all been in those positions, and it's because your conditions weren't being met. So oftentimes when we support folks to obtain employment and say they get the job and they last 2 weeks and they call you and they say, this just isn't working out for me. And folks get really frustrated as the employment professional and say, what? Like this was supposed to be the perfect job, like you were supposed to be off my caseload. Why are you back? Well, oftentimes it's because maybe we didn't listen. We didn't get all the information we needed, and a condition isn't being met. So we have to take some onus in that and go back to the drawing board a little bit. So if we do our work up front and really get to know what are the things that a person really needs to be present, oftentimes the longevity and the fit is much greater. So how are you learning about ideal conditions for job candidates you support? Think about, how are you getting to know those things? Is it by asking the question, what do you have to be successful at work? Well, that's kind of like asking me to say, or asking you to say, tell me a little bit about yourself. It takes a little bit, and then you have this canned speech, but not everything's in there, right? However, through conversation, through that more organic process of getting to know somebody, you can really identify what some of those conditions are. So for example, someone who gets together with their family every single Sunday, and then you support them in finding a job where they're working on Sundays. That's oftentimes not going to be a good fit because they really depend on that time in connecting with their family and their supports. So that's a condition, stay away from Sundays, stay away from my Tuesday night karaoke, whatever it is for somebody. But oftentimes we don't identify those things until we ask, how do you spend your time? Tell me about your weekly schedule. Tell me about your routines. So when it comes to conditions, they can be accommodations, right? So for someone who may need some extra support as far as accessibility of the workplace, a condition could be various accommodations. It could be important commitments. So again, Tuesday karaoke or Sunday dinner with family. Again, where are you at your best? So oftentimes when we think of where we're at our best or our most comfortable, there are conditions that lie within there. And then who challenges or encourages you? What do you like about that person? So identifying who are the people that really make me at my best? What are those personality types like? So if I had a supervisor who was really abrasive, I shut down if someone's really abrasive to me, right? So I'm not going to be at my best if I have a boss who's really strict and yells at me and micromanages me. I'm not going to be at my best, right? So really identifying who are the people that are this job seeker is comfortable with, and looking at the skills and the skills of that person and their personality, right? So is something regimented? Is it flexible? So the whole process really can help identify what those conditions are through various conversations. So now that we look at the conditions, skills and abilities, and contributions, so through the process of using components of discovery, right? So it might be various conversations that you might have with somebody, but you're asking for different sets of information as opposed to the question and answer session of what kind of job do you want, and let's go apply for those jobs. We're having various conversations to identify what are the things that you really need to be successful on the job. What are your skills and abilities? What are natural talents that you might have that you just didn't think could connect with the job? But lo and behold, they do, and they can. And then what are the things that you bring to the workplace that nobody else does? And so we take that information and we start looking for emerging patterns. So what are things that are constantly coming up or presenting themselves? And we identify vocational themes. So the idea in thinking of a theme is much different than thinking of a job description. So when we think about a job description, it's a nice 2-page piece of paper with a bunch of different details of the requirements of the job. And I might meet half of those, but the other half I don't. And so we say, well, you can't apply for that position because you don't meet the job description. We got to move on. And so that is a really, it's a difficult process, right? And is the job seeker, that's also difficult to hear of, sorry, you don't compete with this, so entry level is the only place for you. That's not true. So when we think about themes, we're thinking about overarching concepts as opposed to a job description. So I honestly believe that job descriptions are kind of what led us to identifying folks as unemployable, because we're comparing somebody to something. And we say, okay, if you can't compare to this, then you're not successful, or you're not employable. However, if we think about a theme, so the idea of I just really want to work with people, or I want to help people, or I love working with animals, I like tinkering with motors, all of those can be seen as themes. It doesn't mean that somebody's going to be a mechanic, but maybe there's various types of work in that world that they can contribute to. So we're digging around the labor market in a much different way, other than saying what jobs are hiring based on the labor market. So we think in themes instead of job descriptions. And then themes, again, are overarching concepts that hold many ideas. So the idea of a mechanical theme or mechanics, or think of all the different types of jobs. Think of 20 different jobs that are small businesses. So we try to stay away from big box retailers, and then list out what are 20 different jobs that have anything to do with working with mechanics. And we give ourselves a nice job development plan. When we list out that list of 20, we really encourage folks to identify 3 themes. So in the process of customized employment and discovery, if we just pick one, if we're wrong on that theme, we only had one. If we have 2 themes and we're wrong on one, then we only have one. But the idea is if you have 3 themes, even if you're wrong on one, you still have 2 different themes to go off of. And themes oftentimes can cross over. So yesterday I met with a woman who has an artistic theme and a helping theme, right? So there's a lot of ways that those themes can cross over. Maybe she teaches an art class. Maybe she helps somebody learn how to knit. Maybe she sews purses for a nonprofit organization. I don't know, but there are various ways that those can cross over, and her conditions and skills can be met. Let's see. So themes, again, are supported by information learned in the discovery process. So how do you know if you have the right theme? The information you've learned in discovery supports the theme. It's the evidence behind how we know this person is interested in mechanics, because they spend every weekend, going over to their uncle's house, tinkering with motors, playing with cars, and then, they bring pictures of their room, and it's just books of how to repair car engines, pictures of cars, various old Model T cars. So the idea is that supports the theme. So for example, a lot of times when we're asking folks, we'll say, well, what's your dream job, right? So my dream job is to co-host the Today Show. I'm not on the Today Show, right? And that dream job is pretty one-dimensional, right? I don't want to live in New York City. It definitely doesn't meet my conditions for employment, but the idea sounds kind of fun, right? Like, who doesn't, I don't know. I think it sounds fun. But the idea is when we ask people about their dream job, it's all for the right intentions, but we're really just kind of getting a glimpse of, who somebody is, right? So when we look at a theme, that's much different, right? So for this particular slide, you see a person who really wants to be a phlebotomist. So the idea is the conversation, I just want to be a phlebotomist. I just want to, poke people. However, when we dug further, it's really a science theme. So for this person, it was about wearing the white lab coat. It was about working in a hospital. It really had nothing to do with the phlebotomist position, other than they knew that the phlebotomist position was the way to get to wear the white lab coat and to work in the hospital, was the position that they knew. However, if you broaden that to a science theme, this person was very organized, very detail-oriented. However, she wasn't going to have the skill to poke somebody in the arm with a needle. So by opening it up to a science theme, within the lab, she's able to process specimens, enter in specimen information into the computer systems, which highlights her skills and abilities as detail-oriented, as opposed to just, if we compared her to the job description of the phlebotomist, we would have said, well, gee, sorry, Jane, this isn't going to work for you. However, if we broaden it to a science theme, that opens up a whole lot more options, as opposed to just focusing on the job description, if that makes sense. So we look at, how do we move to job development, right? So there's the discovery. We start with discovery. We're identifying skills, abilities, conditions. That information helps us identify what vocational themes are consistently popping up for this person. And then the job development process begins. So we spend a little bit more time on the front end really getting to know this person, as opposed to meeting them once, having them fill out applications, crossing our fingers, hoping they get the job and get off of our caseload. So by spending more time up front, the idea is that you get a more meaningful outcome, someone who's happy in a career path that meets their conditions for employment and in the long run isn't coming back on your caseload because you help them find a great fit. So what does your plan for job development look like? So you've confirmed your themes. So you confirm themes by looking at your information that's gotten you there thus far, asking the individual, go out and do some informational interviews. So for a few of you, we spent some time together about a year ago when I asked you to go out and do informational interviews. And many of you came back with great stories of learning about businesses and their needs that you had no idea that even existed, right? So you can use informational interviews to help confirm that you're on the right path in aligning what the theme is, right? So, or the vocational theme. So you also want to explore businesses that align with what you've learned in discovery. So again, I had mentioned creating that list of 20. So when you have those vocational themes, I encourage you to just list out 20 different small businesses that have anything to do with that theme. And again, themes are big and overarching. So it takes you a while to come up with 20, but for example, animals, agriculture, culinary would all be themes. Working with dogs is not a theme. It's too specific, right? However, animals is a theme. Mowing lawn is not a theme. It's too specific, right? However, agriculture or working outdoors or that would be the theme. So you try creating that list of 20, and that really guides your job development plan. Utilize an employment planning meeting. So, if the person's really struggling, how about pulling together the people who they've identified who know them really well and the job seeker and you into a room and start, with what is this person really good at? What are their contributions? What are things that, or places or people where they're really successful? And you start gathering this information as a team and then kind of identifying what your next steps might be. It also is a way to utilize individual social capital. So who do they know? Who are the people that they're connected with who also happen to know everybody else in town? And then again, using informational interviews. So asking folks to go out and get to know other people who are interested in the same things that they are. Because if you're interested in what I'm interested in, then I'm interested in spending more time with you because we have a commonality, right? So as opposed to, this is Joe, will you hire him? I think he could be good for your business, but you haven't gotten time to get to know the business. However, if I go in and say, I'm someone who or you could even help facilitate the call and say, hi, my name's Ashlea. I'm working with someone who is super interested in mechanics. He's a big motorhead. You guys are the best in town, and I've been bringing my car there for the last 10 years. Could we just come talk to you about how you got started and get some advice? So that's a much different approach than, are you hiring? If so, do you mind taking this application? So oftentimes we're supporting folks to reach out to businesses that are Fortune 500 companies, your big box retailers. We love to send people to retail and fast food service because they're always hiring and they always have high turnover. So, however, we're missing out on the majority of businesses that make up the fabric of all of our communities. Whether you live in Utah, Iowa, or California, small businesses, small single owner businesses make up the majority of our businesses. But however, as employment professionals, we skip over them all the time because we assume that they don't have the capital to hire other people. It's not true. If you can show businesses, one, are always hiring, whether they're advertising or not. The fact that they're advertising means that they have used all the other natural ways of finding employees and they haven't gotten there yet, right? So, and the bigger the company that you go to, the less room there is for negotiation and helping folks meet their conditions for employment. So when I say foregoing the traditional employment process, what does that mean? So traditional methods are going after those big box retailers. Yesterday, I met with an individual and a family, and this individual, again, who was very interested in art. And so initially the team said, well, why doesn't she just go apply at Michael's and Joann Fabrics? Well, she can, but they sell art items, but she's not necessarily going to be creating art or doing anything with art. And so for the team, it was kind of like this light bulb moment of, oh yeah, she's just going to be working at a cash register or stocking items. It's not necessarily meeting her artistic needs. She gets to spend time with art products and customers, but it's not really fitting what she's looking for. However, connecting her with some artists, connecting her with a screen printer, connecting her with the anime convention because she draws anime, those are all different ways to connect her with things that she's interested in, as opposed to going to those big box retailers that we often think about. Traditional methods are oftentimes rooted in a sales-based methodology, right? Of you're selling this person, take their information, sell them, make the sale, close the deal, and move on. Competing with applications, or completing and competing with other applications, right? So here are 10 applications, go fill them out, turn them in, and hope you get the job. However, when you struggle to compete with a job with 500 other people, you don't get the job very often, right? So also going in and asking businesses, are you hiring? If you don't have a relationship established with the business, going in and asking, are you hiring, is the equivalent of asking for marriage on the first date or running into someone on the sidewalk and saying, hey, you look nice, would you like to get married? It's much too big of a commitment when you just met somebody. So the idea is that you're getting to know a business, you're getting to know the job seeker in a more organic way that meets the needs of both. Also filling out openings, job descriptions. So when we look at customized methods, we're really pushing and supporting that you're connecting with small artisan businesses that are based on the production side as opposed to the consumption side, right? So with retail, it's all based on how much people are buying. However, the producing side, we oftentimes forget about. Who are the folks where do they get their products from? Buying local is a big thing right now. So where are they getting their products from? Could you go and connect with those businesses? Also, the idea of a visual resume as opposed to a paper resume. So if I have limited work experience, or my last work experience was 25 years ago, it's pretty difficult for you to put together a resume for somebody. However, if you ask them to take pictures or have a family or a friend take pictures of them tinkering on cars, doing different things that show their skills, that's a whole lot different to take to a business and say, here are my skills that you can see, as opposed to, where's the last place I worked 25 years ago? Also, the approach of going in and asking for advice. And so genuinely going in and asking for advice, using that concept of the informational interview really helps you get to know a business in a more organic way, right? Because you're genuinely going in, you're not the expert on mechanics, so you're going in and you're asking for their advice in just learning about the industry. And so they think, okay, great, like I've met you once, we had this great conversation. It's much easier to have a follow-up conversation with that business, and maybe there's the potential for something there, but you don't know yet, right? So oftentimes we jump to the no, but we need to do some research first. And then really using the idea of themes instead of job descriptions. So when we look at the idea of informational interviews as part of the job development process, again, we're asking for advice, not for a job. It's also the opportunity to connect with people who have like interests. So one of my favorite stories to tell is an individual I met here in Utah. And he is a chicken expert. He knows all things about chickens. He has his own backyard chickens. He cares for them. They are in beautiful shape. They are, the type of food he feeds them is organic. The type of food you feed your chicken impacts the color of their eggs. He can identify when one of his chickens isn't feeling well. And so the idea was initially, I think his team was helping him find retail positions that had to do with animals, as opposed to we connected with some local folks and identified a local organic chicken farmer just in Provo that we went and had an informational interview with. And those two connected in a great way. They're a natural support for one another. They were in the same attire. They were speaking their own chicken language because they knew that he knew the same content that she knew, right? So he was showing his skills just by having the conversation, and she could identify this is a person that really knows a lot about chickens, right? Like they're my kind of people. So the idea is that we're connecting people with like interests. And even if a job doesn't come from that specific person, however, we're expanding people's social capital. We're connecting people who have like interests, and in turn, that builds their social capital. It builds their opportunity for them to also build their own skills. And so it's an opportunity also for showing and learning about skills and abilities. So you can also learn about somebody's skills and abilities through going through informational interviews, utilizing discovery activities. And then again, it's not about asking for a job. So informational interviews lead to further observations. They lead to further conversations. So if the observation goes well, if you have this conversation with the business, you can ask for the opportunity to come back. Hey, would you mind if we follow up with you in a few weeks about if we have other questions that come up? Or, Joe was really interested in learning more about your flock of chickens. Would it be possible for him to come back and job shadow you in taking care of your 500 chickens? Absolutely, come join me. And that also expands our job seekers know-how of that position, of that industry. So it's an educational piece. And then consider phrases such as, would it be okay for Joe to come back and try it out or get his hands dirty? So we're having a conversation that leads us to the relationship as opposed to asking for everything on the first meeting. And again, think about yourself as a consultant and a problem solver as opposed to a headhunter and plugging people into jobs. And then you also gain some understanding of the business before offering solutions. So, going into a business and saying, I think I know how to fix your business or contribute to your business, again, is a little too much too fast. However, if we get to know the business and we say, tell me about your needs, tell me about how you got started, tell me about some of your frustrations, where you hope to be in 5 years, all of that feeds your basis of information of what this industry might be about and who they partner with and other businesses that you can go and talk to. So you're really kind of mining this supply chain, and we'll look at an example here in a little bit. So here's just an example of how to get the conversation started. In an informational interview, anytime I'm setting up an informational interview, I'll say, hey, my name is Ashlea. I'm a career counselor working with a young professional who's interested in the automotive industry. I hear you're the best in the industry. I don't care if no one has told you that they're not the best in the industry. Every business loves a compliment, right? So compliment their business. If you've been a regular, even better. So take the moment to compliment their business. I hear you're the best in the industry. I was hoping we could just get some advice from somebody who works in the automotive industry. Could we just pick your brain for 15 minutes about how you got started in this work? Sure, come on down. I can't remember a glaring time where I've been turned away from the opportunity to meet with a business because I'm just genuinely going in and asking for advice as opposed to, and I don't give them a lot of information about who I am. I don't say, here's where I work for, here's what I do. It's too much too fast. I'm just here as a general community member trying to get some advice for a guy that I'm working with, and even better if you can bring the job seeker that you're working with. Again, we're only there to ask for advice, so don't bait and switch a business and say, oh, I'm here to ask for advice, but by the way, could you tell me about your hiring practices? Because it's going to turn a business off, and they're going to be like, oh, no, we're done. So you really want to make sure that you're just there asking for advice. The conversation, 5 meetings later might lead to something, but you don't know that yet. Also connect with your local experts. So think about your own social capital. Who are people that you know? Who are your town know-it-alls? They know everybody. They're connected with everybody. And you could go to them and say, hey, I'm working with a guy who's interested in this. Do you know anybody I could connect with? And you can preface it of, I'm not asking, we're not really at the point where we're looking for a job. We're just seeking information. And that you're genuinely there to learn. So this next handout, and I could email this out if it's difficult to see. So the idea is that there are themes, right? So we've talked about themes. In this example, the themes listed are transportation and entertainment. And so those two themes lead you to informational interviews at the Napa store and the radio station. So when you go and you talk to Napa, you learn about the local machine shop. They also work with maybe the auto detailer, the car painter, the engine builder, a tractor restorer, and a heavy equipment rental, right? So the information you're collecting is much deeper. And then that might lead you to a machine shop where you learn about the tech school, the tool maker, the auto recycler that they work with. So you see that those conversations give you a much broader look at who does this company work with? The radio station. So maybe you learn about the voice coach, the journalism department at the college, the recording studio, the community theater. So as you see, thinking in themes gives you a much broader job development plan as opposed to just looking at job descriptions and who's hiring. Also, the idea that when you go and you do those informational interviews, you learn about other businesses that exist and other businesses that they partner with, that they work with. And then there might be the opportunity, like the bubble at the bottom, where it combines the themes to create a totally new job, design a business that satisfies both the customer and the supply chain need. So you may find out through informational interviews and talking to businesses that there's a need in the community that isn't being met, that could be met by the job seeker that you're supporting because they have skills and abilities in that area. So social capital and utilizing your social capital, helping the job seekers that you support utilize their social capital. What does that mean? So who are the people you're connected with? We all have social capital. So ways that you can build it or use it is one, who's in your job seekers network? Where do they frequent? Who do they know? And asking somebody again, tell me about people you know. That's much too direct, other than if you say, well, tell me about places you go to. Do you frequent the same place for lunch or breakfast? Who are folks that you might run into that know you by name? Your internal employment staff. So you all as colleagues sending out, hey, I'm working with a guy who's interested in mechanics. Who out of our group knows anybody I could connect with who also has something to do with mechanics? Oh yeah, here's the place that I've been going to for 10 years. I could give them a call up. You guys could go have an informational interview. Who knows where it'll go, right? But we're not always really good at using one another's personal networks. Your traditional chamber and community groups, right? So the idea of being involved in the fabric of your own community. Who are the people that you know? Also, targeted use of social media. I'm not a real expert on use of social media, but some people are great at it and they know tons of people and are great about sending messages to folks or sharing about work that they're doing. And then again, using your own personal social network. Who are people that I know? So for example, somebody I met through a chamber or community group in my own community, she has started her own cupcake business. But she knows everybody in town. She's from the Des Moines area. She lived there her whole life. She now works for the chamber, is the small business development person, but she literally knows everybody. So I know I could always give her a call and say, I'm just trying to connect with somebody in X industry. And I have no doubt she would be able to connect me with somebody. So just who are those people in your own networks? So when it comes to negotiation, it begins with the job developer, right? So when we're looking at interest-based negotiation, the piece that doesn't change is we start with the job developer or the job seeker, but negotiation begins with you as the developer, the employment specialist, the career counselor. When you see ways in which the job seeker can contribute to the business in ways that are valuable to the business, right? So as opposed to just going in and saying, well, you hired Joe, you've spent time getting to know the job seeker, you've spent time getting to know the business, and you can really present a clear picture of would it be a benefit if Joe provided this for your business? Well, yeah, it would be, because you've spent time getting to know that this is a genuine need of the business as opposed to just jumping in and asking for the job. So the idea is that it's really a two-part research process. We have the discovery process, which we start off with, and getting to know who the job seeker is. We have to get to know who they are before we have the skills to go and negotiate. So discovery, we're identifying skills, interests, abilities, conditions for employment. I see that this isn't coming through very clearly I apologize for the typos. In my slides, it looks okay. But in the discovery process, you're looking at skills, abilities, conditions, right? We take that information, we identify those vocational themes. But on the business side, we also have to spend time doing our research and getting to know various businesses through informational interviews, job analysis, needs assessments, really spending time to look at what are the business's needs. But you don't get there on the first date, right? You've got to build those conversations, use that informational interview. So this seems simple, but I think a lot of times we just want to jump to the relationship with the business, right? But the business conversation just begins with hello, right? The same conversational skills that got you into this job are going to help you get better outcomes. Start with just a conversation with a business. Hello leads to a conversation, right? Going in and genuinely asking for advice helps build the rapport and the trust that you need to get to know that business further. And then the idea is that you're hopefully leaving with a plan for a second conversation. So anytime I talk to a business, I always leave with the idea of, or the question of, would it be okay if we follow up with you if we still have a few questions? Could we pick your brain if something else comes up? Absolutely. And then conversations lead to relationships, right? So again, think about the relationships in your life currently. They didn't happen overnight. They took time. So same thing goes for the work that we're all doing. We have to get to know the business, and then that trust allows for the negotiation. So once that trust is established, the business has a whole lot more trust in you as a professional to say, oh yeah, they have gotten to know my business. This idea does make sense and it could benefit our business. So when it comes to the idea of the conversation, one, that we're a job developer versus the consultant piece, right? So oftentimes if we go in and just say that we're a developer, or half the time the titles that we use don't make sense to businesses. So even just going in and making up your own title of I'm a consultant or I'm a career counselor, or not making our roles more difficult than they have to be. Also, that you're a resource for helping meet business needs. Now, again, that's not ever how I start the conversation of, hey, I'm a consultant and I'm here to meet your business needs and sell you something. That comes across as kind of disingenuous. However, again, going in and saying, I just want to connect with someone who's passionate about X is very different, because everybody wants to talk about what it is that they love to do. And then you're having a target audience. So really be original, be genuine, highlight the individual skills, abilities, and contributions. So as you're presenting the job seeker, introducing the job seeker, you're highlighting their abilities, their skills, what they bring to the table. And then, you want to appeal to the business and make that right match, right? So it's not about selling to the business, it's about making a match to help the business increase their bottom line. We want to help them increase their revenue, right? So what can this person do or bring to their business that's going to help them do that? And so oftentimes we have to use what we've learned in discovery to get us to that negotiation place. So for example, if I know everybody in town, I met with this guy who he literally knew everybody. The news station did a story on him because he knew all 550 of his classmates' names. And he genuinely just, would every day they captured him in the hallways calling everybody by their first name. And so his family really wanted him to work with other people, which is obviously a condition for him. And so as a young high school student, he ended up working at the local grocery store, which is not his long-term career, but he increased the foot traffic of that grocery store based on all of the people who knew him, and people will come to the grocery store just to see him. So he is really, benefiting that business by the skills that he brings to the table. So when it comes to interest-based negotiation, a lot of times our fear in approaching a business is because it's a fear of communicating with someone who's different than ourselves, right? So I know nothing about mechanics. So I may be fearful in communicating with someone who is very different and has very different interests than I do. However, the idea is that we're looking for commonalities, and that's why if you are working with the job seeker, right, who's also passionate about mechanics, the business is passionate about mechanics. We're building the opportunity for a relationship to connect people who have like interests. So we're looking for commonalities. We also want to reframe problems and find solutions. So we'll talk about this in a minute. And then know that when conflict arises or when pushback arises with a business, that it's not about you. Oftentimes we can take things really personally and think, oh, well, it's an attack towards me. However, it's not. It's just the business needs more information. And instead of saying, I need more information, it comes across as pushback of, well, I don't know about this, or, well, tell me about what you're concerned about. Tell me a little bit more about that. That's very different than saying, oh, that won't be a problem. You always want to affirm what it is that they're saying. And then the end goal is to connect with people and create an opportunity for a win-win, right? For that customized employment outcome. So when we're looking at the interest-based negotiations, again, we're looking for the win-win, but it's based on common interests, right? So it's based on businesses need workers. And oftentimes we look at businesses, I think, and we say, oh, they're employers. Well, businesses don't exist to employ people. They exist to make money, right? So a lot of times we've got to stop treating businesses as the place that just employs people, but as a place that really has a mission and their own vision, and how can we help them meet their bottom line and increase that? So businesses, again, are always looking to increase their revenue. So if you can present a business with a plan to increase their revenue, they're certainly going to pay attention and listen, right? Because who doesn't want to make more money? And job seekers want to work and want to contribute. So how can you make that match? So for example, we did an informational interview with a coffee roaster in Iowa. And this coffee roaster was booming, just busting at the seams. They were producing, I think, 80 gallons of coffee a month. And so they had just bought this brand new coffee roaster, and they were already outgrowing it. And this coffee roaster was very expensive. But the idea was that they also didn't have other people who could help roast, right? So by working with this job seeker who also happens to be blind, we learned that coffee roasting has nothing to do with sight. The best coffee roasters in the world only use, because everything is based on smell. There's 5 key processes in roasting coffee, but it's all based on smell. It has nothing to do with sight. So anyway, the idea of, could this person be trained to be a roaster and help them produce more coffee, right? So this person also had some resources where they may have been able to purchase another coffee roaster. But had I gone to that business as a follow-up and said, hey, my buddy here, Joe, has the resources to purchase a coffee roaster. If he could have a partnership with you, if he brings another roaster and you mentor him to roast coffee and you could increase your production by 1/3, would that be a benefit to your business? Okay, now you have my attention because I can produce more product and bring in more money. So interest-based negotiation is really not a sales strategy. It's not about selling, it's about making a match. It's about identifying, here's a person that has contribution, here's a business that has need, and I can make the match there. So we have to see the win first, right? And you don't get there by just one conversation with the business. It's taking various conversations. It's getting to know them, asking for follow-up questions, asking for the opportunity to come in and job shadow, to do a task analysis, to learn more about the details of a position. And then it stems from solid knowledge, again, of the individual skills and contributions. The more we know about a person, the easier it is to negotiate. And then in turn, the business tasks and knowing about what makes up this business, what are the challenges that this business faces, and then how do we make the match. So with interest-based negotiation, it really requires that we have some preparation again, right? It's not the first conversation. Oftentimes it's not even the third conversation. It may take you a few months, but again, the outcome is much greater, and the long-term career path is much greater for your job seeker. It also highlights what matters to the business owner. So again, we're helping the business, we're supporting the business to increase their profits, hopefully solve unmet needs. So identifying, well, yeah, this is the stuff that we just never seem to get to, or we always struggle to get to. Maybe they have piles and piles of paper that need to be organized. And you're working with someone who is very organized, and she has a great attention to detail. That could be a match that's made, right? But you don't get there unless you've built trust. So again, one of the key pieces is it takes time, it takes relationship building, and kind of using our own emotional IQ to read the scenario, right? So the process of negotiation, we have to have knowledge of the job seeker, and we have to have knowledge of the business. But how do we build the knowledge of the business? Well, one, start with the informational interview. Start by going in and just asking for advice. Second, observe others on the job. Learn about the position from other people who are doing the job. And then schedule follow-up visits. So then maybe come in and ask, would it be possible to come in and complete a job analysis? Could we come in and spend more time with this position to really detail out what is involved? So then the idea is that maybe you're finding unmet needs in that job analysis that your job seeker could meet or help benefit the company. And then determine how you can improve efficiency, increase their revenue. And then prepare, plan, have a conversation with the business, and then comes the negotiation. So it's not informational interview and then negotiate. It's building that relationship with the business. What are things that can be negotiated? Well, tasks that need to be done. So maybe things that are left undone at the end of the day, or things that are piling up on the business's to-do list. It could be tasks that the job seeker could perform, or maybe an individual, maybe they could perform the task together. It could be equipment or tools that could be contributed. So individuals who are receiving public benefits such as SSI or Title II benefits, oftentimes there are work incentives that could be utilized there. Could they bring in equipment or tools that would contribute to that business that they would own? So if they don't work there anymore, those tools or that equipment goes with them, but oftentimes that can contribute to the business and their bottom line. It might be hours of employment that are being negotiated. It could be their pay, their production rate, accommodations. Again, the list is ever going of what can be negotiated, right? But those are just some ideas. So also helping our conversation with business is looking at what are the features and the benefits of our service. So The feature of your service is what is the benefit to the business, right? So with when we look at resource ownership, Joe has resources to purchase a coffee roaster. So that's the feature, right? So he has those resources to bring the coffee roaster. And at no cost to the business, Joe can double the production and increase the profit. That's the benefit. So how are we looking at, how are we communicating the feature of our service and the benefit? My favorite thing to use in dealing with objections is the concept of feel, felt, found, and maybe some of you have heard about it, but it really gives you a structure of how do you deal with those objections that come from businesses, and you get them all the time. And objections, again, are just a business asking for more information. Don't take it personally, but first you always want to affirm how the business feels. I understand how you feel about this. Others have felt this way too. So you're saying, business, you're not alone. Other people have had this exact same concern. And what they found was that after they did this, and this, it was a great outcome. So for example, Joe, I understand you feel that adding a position would be too costly. Pete at True Value felt the exact same way. However, what they found was that adding a position to streamline their customer service actually increased their quality of customer service, and in turn increased revenue over time because they were delivering a greater service. I'd be more than happy to connect you with Pete at True Value if that would be a benefit. So, you're affirming how they feel and then delivering a solution, as opposed to saying, well, gee, your concern isn't valid or true. Here's the solution, right? So it's a different approach, and it really takes time to affirm their concern. So how do we determine a business need or the tasks? So again, businesses are doing business. They're not in the business of employing people. And so we have to treat them as such. And using our social and our economic capital, using those informational interviews to really get to know what makes up a business. And then spending time observing, even utilizing time-limited paid work experiences. Can folks go in and try a job? Or, could they utilize an unpaid or a paid internship for a period of time to test the job out? And then also you can look at deconstructing a job. So if you were to go in and do a job analysis, you're looking at the anatomy of the job. What makes up the job? Receiving a job description isn't enough, because how many of you do exactly what's on your job description and only that? Right? None of you. You do 1,000 things more. So the idea of talking to a business and asking for a job description, we know that that doesn't embody the whole position, right? So spending time getting to know the anatomy of a job really helps, one, to negotiate, but two, to really look at what does make up this job and would it be a good fit for the individual I'm working with. And then also that you're there to solve problems. You want to bring value and benefit to the business, and we do that again by really getting to know the business in a genuine way, identifying needs through conversation, not going in and saying, hey, Mr. Business, what are your needs? What are the things that you'd like for my job seeker to do? Again, it's a little too forward. Use your conversation skills. Read between the lines. Oh, so you're saying that these things are a struggle for your business to really get to at the end of the day. Yeah, we just never get to it. So, you take a note and say, I think I could follow back up on this, and, have a conversation with the business and say, hey, I actually happen to be working with someone who has incredible value and skill in organizing, and you mentioned that this is something that you really struggle with. Would it be a benefit to have a position where someone comes in and spends a couple hours a day organizing your files? So again, that's negotiating. However, it's a whole lot different than saying, will you hire Joe? So when we look at the whole process and review, it's how are we getting to know the person? Are we getting to know a person through assessments and question and answer sessions? And again, for some folks that works, and that's really effective, and they've had great placements through it. However, not everybody on our caseload is highlighted best by an assessment. So using those concepts of discovery to get to know a person differently, to really look at who is this person based on how they spend their time, what they enjoy doing, who do they spend their time with, what are their skills, what are things that you tinker around or do at home, what are things that people say that you're good at. And explore those interests, dive further, really utilize the idea of thinking in themes as opposed to job descriptions. Think about yourself, right? In this whole process, you can think about your own employment process. How did you get to where you are? Who were the people that connected you with the people that got you this job? What are your themes? Is it hopefully working with people or helping people? It might be some of your themes also turn into hobbies, right? If your theme is not necessarily met through your job, oftentimes they become hobbies or you spend your time doing other things. So really looking at themes as opposed to job descriptions. The other piece that's key, I think, to really focus on is connecting with small businesses as opposed to just helping people apply to big box retailers, wherever the labor market is going. And again, that works for some people, but it doesn't work for all. So you've got to have a variety of tools in your tool belt to support folks to obtain employment. So starting small, getting to know your small artisan businesses. I've spent enough time in Salt Lake City that this place is ripe with small businesses, incredible small businesses that are doing some really cool work. So connect with them. And even if you are off the clock and you're having dinner someplace, you can have informational interviews all the time. It's a conversation is really what it is, right? So, I would say I'm having informational interviews with businesses every time I meet them, right? So my favorite place to go is Ruby Snap Cookies in Salt Lake. And I learned so much about them by just going in and having a conversation about their cookies. And, and it started off with, there was one man in there. And in all the times, I've been coming to Salt Lake for 3 years now. And I think I've gone there almost every time I'm in town. But the only time I've been in there, out of all the times I've been there, there was one time there was one guy, and I said, I've never seen a guy in here. And he goes, oh, well, I'm married to the owner, and I just drive around the delivery truck, and I'm not usually here. And 20 minutes later, we learn that he used to have a car place where he fixed up old cars. He no longer does because now he's supporting his wife's business, but he still tinkers around with old cars in his spare time. So he's got skills there, right? And does it on the side. He's like, yeah, there's no requirement to work here. We just hire the happy. So if you know somebody who's happy, you send them our way. But just having a general conversation with this guy was pretty easy. And very organic. It wasn't forced. I wasn't in there to do anything other than buy a cookie. But 20 minutes later, we have this great conversation, and I have no doubts I could still follow up with him today and pick his brain if needed. So know that informational interviews really don't have to be hard. You're just getting to know a business in a casual way. And then also using job analysis to understand the anatomy of a job to give you more leverage and to give you more information to get to the stage of negotiation, so that you're spending equal time getting to know the job seeker, but also getting to know the business and then making the match. So where you're at now, oftentimes we all like to operate out of our comfort zone, right? So it's where we're comfortable, it's where, our blood pressure stays the same, but oftentimes where the magic happens, where the really cool work happens, is far out of our comfort zone. So to conclude our time today, I want to encourage you to get out of your comfort zone. And if that's talking to a small business, if that's doing a couple informational interviews this week, identifying some themes that your job seekers might have, or even asking someone to bring some pictures of their home, or meeting them at a coffee shop as opposed to your office, I highly encourage you to do that, because I do believe that it truly impacts our outcomes. I've seen it happen where it helps us get folks jobs and careers, and helps folks get out of poverty and get more money in their bank accounts, which is what we're all about. So I was so worried that we had so much content to cover that you're done early. So if you have questions, comments, please email me. Please check out our website if you want more information around customized employment. You could also Google customized employment, and a lot of information will come up, particularly the Office of Disability Employment Policy has a lot of information. The Work Incentive, or the WIOA, all talks about customized employment. So it really is part of our work. So anyway, thank you for the invite to be here. And